There's no room to negotiate when it comes to protecting Americans' national security, including protecting emerging technology.
Huawei, China's top chip maker, have built an advanced processor to power its latest smartphone.
I was obviously upset when I saw the Huawei announcement. We don't have any evidence that they can manufacture 7 nanometer at scale.
TSMC has said that its high-profile plans to build a chip factory will no longer start next year. The shortage of technical talent has caused serious delays.
You've got this CHIPS Act, it's been a year, but yet not $1 has been dispersed just yet.
I'm pushing the team to go fast, but even more important to get it right.
Why do you think Gina Raimondo, the US Commerce Secretary, was upset when Huawei announced its 7 nanometer chip? Why the United States considers everything about China as a national security threat, so they need to protect emerging technologies? And how come that 2 decades of targeting Huawei with technology sanctions and market access restrictions have only fueled the tech surge and growth of Huawei to become a world technology leader, as well as a global case study for resilience, innovation, and crisis leadership? In the second episode, we'll take a deep dive into the timeline of events describing the US battle with Huawei, which is at the center of the chip war between the US and China. We shall see how the outcome of this battle sends a clear message about the future of this war. We shall be starting from the beginning of the trade war under Trump administration, same as we did in the first episode.
Huawei is very dangerous. 5G networks must be secured. They have to be guarded from the enemy.
We have met the enemy, and it is Huawei.
The perception that Huawei poses a national security threat is actually very old, to the extent that in 2011, when the US blocked a $2 million deal from Huawei to buy a US startup called 3Leaf, Huawei USA chairman sent an open letter to the US government trying to clear the unfounded and unproven claims of close connections with the Chinese military, disputes over intellectual property rights, allegations of financial support from the Chinese government, and threats to the national security of the United States. They even invited US authorities to carry out any type of investigation about Huawei, as they are keen to work with the US openly and transparently. However, the claim from the US side was that the Chinese government may use Huawei's equipment to spy on the US and its allies, and actually cause damage to the US telecom infrastructure. And this because Huawei's founder served as an engineer in the Chinese military and may still have close ties with them. This old fear from Huawei was actually intensified under Trump administration, when the US officials became highly concerned with China's national intelligence law that took effect in June 2017, which states in Article 7 that all organizations and citizens shall support, assist, and cooperate with national intelligence efforts. This old perception is what the FBI Director Chris Wray repeated again on February 2018 in his warning about the use of Huawei and ZTE phones, as being from a foreign government that doesn't share the same values as the United States. Of course, this argument was highly criticized by Huawei to be still repeated by US officials. 3 months later, the Pentagon took the first escalating action by banning the use of Huawei and ZTE phones on military bases. On a potential security threat these phones may pose on personnel, information, and missions. And in August, Trump signed a defense bill that prohibits the US government and its contractors from buying certain telecom equipment from Chinese firms, including Huawei. From episode 1, we know that on July 2018, Trump started imposing trade tariffs on Chinese products. And although the Chinese government did the same to US products, it seemed that the Chinese president, Xi Jinping, tried to ease this escalating war through an official meeting with President Trump during the G20 summit in Buenos Aires, Argentina on December that year. And while the two leaders were in talks, something very escalating for Huawei was taking place in Canada during the same time.
Meng Wanzhou, Chief Financial Officer of China's Huawei Technologies, has been arrested in Canada and faces extradition to the United States. Meng, who's also the daughter of the founder of Huawei, was arrested at the request of the US for allegedly violating Iran sanctions. Meng was arrested as she was changing flights in Vancouver on Saturday, the same day Donald Trump and Xi Jinping agreed on a ceasefire in their trade fight over issues like technology transfer, espionage, and intellectual property. Canada is stuck squarely in the middle of a legal and diplomatic puzzle. The Canadian ambassador to Beijing was in fact summoned to the Chinese Foreign Ministry yesterday to hear a formal complaint, and then this morning, the same thing happened to the U.S. ambassador to China.
China is warning the Canadian government, we will face grave consequences. For Canada's telecom industry, Huawei is a key player.
We demand the other side to provide an explanation for the detention and for the immediate release of the relevant person.
Beijing is now holding 2 Canadians, apparently doubling the reprisals for Canada's arrest of a rich and powerful Chinese executive and multiplying the concerns for Ottawa this morning in this deepening diplomatic dispute.
This has our attention at the very highest levels of our government.
That attention quickly turned to legal action in both China and Canada. Meng was given an ankle bracelet and confined to her Vancouver mansion while she fought extradition. The 2 Michaels were imprisoned in China. Canadian officials were given limited access to them.
Huawei is the world's leading supplier of telecommunications equipment, and Meng is more than just a top Huawei official. She's the daughter of the firm's founder. In the city of Shenzhen, the Chinese tech hub that Huawei calls home, people are worried. And for Huawei, it's now a family matter.
For Huawei's founder, the arrest of his daughter was more than just a headline. It was a storm hitting the foundations of his life's work, both as a business leader and as a father. The weight of the world, the future of Huawei, and the well-being of his own child are all now resting on his shoulders. In the corridors of Huawei's headquarters and offices all over the world, employees have realized that the threat to their company is real and that they were all under attack by the United States and their allies. The daughter of their company's founder is now being used as a bargaining chip in the trade war between the US and China, and that his leadership to manage his own family crisis is as inspiring for them as his leadership to manage his business crisis. It was exactly these feelings that were needed to fuel innovation, defiance, and resilience of Huawei's employees. From now on, every project, every line of code, and every innovation becomes a testament to their unwavering spirit. They were not just building technology anymore, they were crafting a legacy of resilience. So apart from the headlines covering the arrest of Ms. Meng, I believe this incident was a real transformative event for Huawei, and that clear strategic decisions were taken by the CEO to even prepare for the worst, so as not only to survive this storm, but to thrive. In March 2019, Huawei sued the US government as the Congress failed to present evidences on any security threat in their equipment. However, as a major retaliation action, Trump effectively banned Huawei with a national security order in May, which completely blocked Huawei from doing business in the United States, disrupted the global supply chain of any supplier having US parts in their products, and would equally have a negative impact on 5G deployment in the States. Now, any US company would need to get a license to do business with Huawei. Over 30 US component suppliers, losing more than $11 billion of business with Huawei, started to implement the ban, like Micron, Qualcomm, Broadcom, and others. Even Google planned to cut Huawei's phones from Android updates. But Huawei said they spent years preparing for this scenario. They have been stockpiling supplies of chips and components from US suppliers for months and announced a ready replacement for Google's Android in August. These circumstances require the CEO to send a letter to all staff to warn about a live or die moment. As the firm goes into battle mode, the letter contained military metaphors as well as his famous one about the plane with broken wings, which he stated in many interviews that in 3 years they will have a completely new plane. At that time, the Chinese government launched a $29 billion semiconductor fund to boost its domestic chip industry to become less dependent on US technology. It took Huawei only 4 months to announce that they've completely cut all US components from their new phones, as they have found new suppliers and already built new chipsets and technologies in-house. So it was not clear at that time actually who was really winning and who was losing, but certainly big losses to US firms and small wins to Huawei, next to a 23% revenue jump of their smartphone sales in China in first half of 2019 at the free marketing campaign granted to them by the US actions so far. Ren Zhengfei estimated $30 billion drop in revenue this year, but later he was confident that it won't exceed $10 billion, which was a much smaller impact for him than he expected.
And this administration has broadened the notion of what national security is way beyond any other administration. And when it comes to China,
we cannot allow any other country to outcompete the United States in this powerful industry of the future,
according to this administration.
And in December, it's been a year with Ms. Meng in house arrest in Canada, with also a small win in court to receive the official documents of her arrest and extradition.
Have you become closer as father and daughter?
Yes, indeed. In the past, Meng Wanzhou might not give me a single call in a whole year. Simply knowing that my child is out there working really hard already makes me happy. Now, our relationship has become much closer. As a father, I of course care about my children. However, the experience of hardship and suffering is good for Meng and her growth. Under the grand backdrop of the Sino-US trade war, she is like a small ant being caught between the collision of two giant powers.
One more year have passed, with the United States still refusing to release the documents linked to Ms. Meng's arrest, which made Huawei file a lawsuit against multiple US agencies to force the release of the documents. And they also filed another one, disputing that Huawei is a security threat, and this time with Biden in office. It wasn't until September 2021 that Ms. Meng entered an agreement with the US Justice Department that would allow her to return to China and the US to drop the case after 3 years of detainment in Canada.
Will you be heading home soon? Good morning. You look happy?
Over the past 3 years, my life has been turned upside down. It was a disruptive time for me as a mother, a wife, and a company executive.
The return of Ms. Meng was a great celebration indeed. However, with Biden in office, the fight with Huawei was still on. Earlier in July 21, FCC approved a nearly $1.9 billion fund to reimburse US small telecom firms to rip and replace Huawei's equipment. Then Biden signed the Secure Equipment Act to prevent Huawei from receiving new equipment licenses from US regulators. However, Huawei was already in a path to strengthen its technology to a much higher level. And while Biden's chip war was heating up with China, as covered in episode 1, the US was to wake up on a big surprise from Huawei.
U.S. Secretary of Commerce Gina Raimondo's visit to Beijing in late August was supposed to calm a standoff that has set China and the U.S. at odds with each other on everything, from geopolitics to trade. Her department has spent the past few years making it harder for China to buy or manufacture the advanced semiconductors needed to fuel the upcoming technology revolution.
There is no room to negotiate when it comes to protecting Americans' national security.
Her visit was quickly overshadowed by this. The Mate 60 is made to compete with Apple's iPhone. But unlike the iPhone, the Mate 60 didn't get a splashy launch event. Instead, it was quietly released for sale online. It still managed to sell out within hours.
What it made the timing of that device look like was though that Beijing was trying to send a significant signal to the US to say, hey, look, you've taken all of these steps, you've tried to hold us back, but here we are, this is what we can do. What really changed everybody's view of this device was what was at the heart of it. The microprocessor that was designed and manufactured in China.
It's at the center of tensions between the world's two biggest economies. The phone made by Chinese tech giant Huawei represents a breakthrough by Beijing as it tries to escape Washington's controls on its access to technology and establish a self-sufficient chip industry. If those U.S. controls had been successful, then a smartphone as advanced as this simply should not be possible without importing key components.
China now is more capable than ever of building advanced technologies.
And it worried U.S. officials who are more concerned about advanced chips going into military equipment than smartphones. It left them wondering, how exactly did China do it?
Huawei's chip division, HiSilicon, was able in the past to manufacture its chip designs at TSMC, but the US sanctions stopped that. Also, the US stopped China from importing the advanced extreme lithography machines, AUVs, from the world leader in this technology, the Dutch company ASML. These machines are the ones capable of etching transistor designs onto silicon wafers below 7nm scale. The latest models of these big machines cost around $380 million. The US also stopped Huawei from access to the highly expensive and sophisticated electronic design automation tools, or EDA tools, that are used in the design process and are dominated by American firms like Cadence, Synopsys, and Mentor Graphics. So Huawei being cut off from TSMC and with no access to their EUV machines have turned to their local Chinese chip manufacturer, SMIC, that have the old generation of ASML machines, the DUV models, which theoretically cannot etch transistors below 7nm scale. The US strategy from doing that was to keep China's tech capability 8 to 10 years behind the US. But it's these exact sanctions that fueled the innovation of Huawei and SMIC engineers to come together to a new process that can tweak the DUV machines to actually etch transistors below 7nm, maybe at a less yield and takes a longer time, meaning more cost. But this cost was subsidized by the government funds, as they all were in one boat that the US was targeting for years to sink. And all of this while using in-house and Chinese EDA tools that were another surprise in this whole achievement. Now, China is only 4 to 5 years behind the US, with new capabilities showing it can close the gap very soon. As shocking all of this to US officials, they have turned to more sanctions and restrictions on China, including limiting access to DUV machines from ASML and closing all possible gaps in ban orders that US tech companies were actually able to find to keep doing business with China as they have always used to. However, revenues of Huawei soared in 23, having been in the spotlight after their chip breakthrough, and they have managed to outsell Apple's iPhone in China in the first quarter of 24. The headlines were all talking about how Huawei came back from the dead and that decades of US sanctions could not actually bring the company to its knees. In 24, Huawei is decoupling completely from the US to mark the end of the company's lengthy and expensive endeavor to clear its name and stay in the North American market. This is why it celebrates its new AI chip that targets to compete with NVIDIA's famous A100 GPU that's powering the global AI revolution. Also, Huawei announced it's about to manufacture new chips at 5nm technology node this year, indicating how China is moving much faster to close the technology gap with the United States. It seems that the plain metaphor that was used 4 years ago by Ren Zhengfei is being fully redesigned and is ready to take off. But as everything about China will remain to be a security threat, it seems the US will be repeating this scenario again, but this time with BYD, the car manufacturer that managed to beat Tesla in the global sales of electric vehicles in 23.
If you think about it, cars these days are, it's like an iPhone on wheels. And imagine a world in which there are millions of Chinese cars on US roads collecting this data every minute of every day on millions of Americans and sending that back to Beijing. That's a scary place to be. By the way, not to mention the fact that your car can't run if the software is disabled. So imagine a world where with the flip of a switch, all of those cars could be disabled. So the threats are potentially very significant, and we want to protect the American people. What we are doing today isn't about economic competition, and not at all about, as you say, doing a favor for car companies.
It's not a cover for trade sanctions and protectionism in disguise of national security.
No, look.
While the US is very busy fighting successful Chinese companies, their internal process to aggressively move forward in implementing the Chips and Science Act is severely delayed. Out of the $39 billion fund allocated in the Act to boost local chip manufacturing industry, it took actually 1.5 years for the first major award of fund to take place in February 24 for the Singaporean chip fabrication company GlobalFoundries to build a facility in New York and expand an existing one in Vermont. This comes after 2 other small releases of funds to local firms. So till now, only 4% of the allocated fund is released. And while the top technology player TSMC announced its delay of the Arizona factory 1 year ahead on shortage of skilled labor, it actually managed to launch a new factory in Japan on February 24 after just 2 years of starting construction, giving an early edge in this global chip technology race to a much less vocal country than the US, but a much more focused government on what needs to be done. In episode 3, I'll be digging deeper into the challenges facing the US in its race to chip supremacy, so stay tuned and subscribe. This is Tech Analytics Hub.